Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spark Studios, the show where we cover everything from quantum astrophysics to the best way not to throw up when you do 3 beer bongs in a row trying to impress your college friends that you'll probably never see again after graduation. With that being said, my name is Kid Quark. I'll be your host for today's episode and likely every other episode that ever exists. Um, but yeah, today we'll be covering relativity and what it means to the universe. Now, before you go hit that big red abort button or commit unceremonious suicide, I want to make it clear that I'm not exploring relativity so much as a mathematic formula as I am like a philosophical debate. What I mean is relativity is something that affects our everyday lives and is very important to the universe. And this episode I'm going to cover why that is. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about is Einstein, because let's be honest here, you can't talk about relativity in good conscience without mentioning the man. So basically what Einstein discovered with relativity is that time is subjective, and what I mean by that is it can change based on certain variables like position and speed, whereas Newton believed that time was an absolute factor, as in it was rigid and it never changed no matter the circumstances. Einstein proved this wrong, and this is like that hindsight bias, because you look back and you're like, well, of course time was relative. I mean, even like formulas that make up time are based on things like speed and velocity. That's easy to say, but we have so much evidence now that points in that favor. That's like the same as saying it's obvious that the Earth is spherical. Well, yeah, it's obvious because we can view it from space, but maybe in the 1400s it wasn't so obvious. Well, another thing that makes relativity seem obvious now is that it doesn't just apply to time, but everything really. Like the entire universe operates on the principle of relativity, meaning that everything is what it is only by a relative means, because it. Now, this is a hard concept to grasp. Like, to help explain this, let's just start with a very simple concept, like the number 1. That's about as simple as it can get, right? Like, it represents one thing mathematically. Well, there's a problem with that, is because from 1 to 0, there are an infinite amount of numbers. Even, let's say that I wrote the number 1 down on a piece of paper, even the tiny amount of graphite that I used on the pencil to write that number 1 is composed of millions of molecules that are composed of billions of atoms that are composed of a countless amount of subatomic particles. I mean, if everything is made out of something, then what are the subatomic particles made out of? You know, that's why math is so good at representing the universe, because if you think about it, 1 is made up of an infinite amount of numbers, just as is any object in the universe. So that's why physicists love math so much. It's because the symmetry it just appeals to the human mind. And that's the thing, like, once you grasp this concept, it just like keeps expanding and getting more and more complex and absurd. Like, if you look at this room around me, like this painting behind me, it only exists in this form. You can only see it because you evolved the optics in your eyes necessary to transfer all this information of light, reflecting off of the pigments of the painting and going into this technological development that is the webcam, and then that's feeding into a huge baffling network of information called the internet, like bringing it directly to you. And not only that, like, you would need the colors, which are basic principles of the universe, including the principles of light. And you would also need Earth, which needs a solar system, which needs a sun to gravitate around, which needs a galaxy to be inside, which needs a universe, which needs a Big Bang. So that's what I mean by relativity, is that you can't have one thing without everything, it seems like. It's like the universe is like the Three Musketeers, you know, like all for one and one for all. And once you realize this, it just opens up the door for like a quieting appreciation of existence, and it's like baffling complexity. Like even even the simple task of going outside and like smelling a flower, in order for that to exist, an entire universe first had to be created. And it's just, and all of those intertwining principles had to just exist just so that you could smell that flower that's likely to die once the seasons change. And you, as the appreciator, are also likely to die relatively soon afterwards, especially in terms of the universe. Like a human life is not even an average of 100 years, it's much less than that. But that compared to the universe, even the Earth itself is over 4 billion years old. That's like a microsecond. It means nothing. It'd be the same as us comparing our lifespan to that of a fly. So I know what you're probably thinking at this point. Like, yeah, those are all interesting ideas and thought experiments, but where does that get us? Like, how that doesn't help with any technological advancements, or doesn't make my career better. So who cares? And you're right to a degree to think that. But at the same time, knowing this in itself can be useful for everyday life applications. Like science is great, but you need the spirit behind it. You know, it's like being intelligent but not ambitious, which makes it useless. You know, so knowing that everything is relative is a really intuitive way to help your brain actually, because the brain works using associations, which is how the universe works anyway. And maybe it's just because that's how we interpret it, but everything has to be connected for a brain too. Like a brain uses 100 billion, I'm sorry, brain cells to create 500 trillion connections, which allows it to associate tiny bits of information, and it associates it so much that it all just connects in your mind with this electrochemical display that could be similar to fireworks, like creating an image in your mind by all of these exploding all at once to create something new. And just like by knowing how the universe works, it can help you think better and understand parallel thought processes. It can make you more creative. It can, if you're depressed, it can give you a better appreciation of the things around you. If you're bored, there's no reason to ever be bored in life, because there's just so much to explore that if you're bored, the simple fact of the matter is it's your fault. Which reminds me, it's like the life and the universe is such an amazing thing, and we always try to emulate it with like games and simulators and stuff. And the reason, even like games as amazingly advanced as they are today, and like optically, they just like you probably couldn't tell the difference between a game and a scene in real life if they didn't want you to. Well, the thing is, that's great, but what the game is not good at, like it's good at processing the surface, it's good at letting you see the tip of the iceberg, but the game can't compare to the universe's immense complexity and like how many things are necessary to calculate in order to make something as simple as like a jump. Like a game can make a jump mechanic, and it can make like interactions that seem as on the surface as if they would happen in real life, like a conversation, but they couldn't generate creative conversation, and they couldn't like create phenomenons that the universe does naturally. And the reason they can't do that is because the raw amount of data that it would require. I mean, today we always talk about how advanced we are technologically, and how much space we can, like the amount of space and like hard drive power that we have just keeps increasing exponentially, which is great. I mean, it's very useful, especially if I can hold 8 billion songs and have like 3,000 different movies on a tiny little drive. That's awesome. But if you consider that, that amount of data is nothing compared to the amount of data that's on the tip of this pen. Like it, so then I feel like the next step for humanity is being able to just emulate, even the most tiny facet of the universe. Like all that processing power. Like it's humbling to know that we still have such a long way to go. And now that we've covered all that, I just want to take a moment, to remind you that it's important, though the universe is so complex, it's important to remember that it's also very simplistic, or it can be. You know what I mean? Like it's great to understand and appreciate how immense everything is, but at the same time, you need to pause and understand that, like, this pen is still just a pen, or this painting is still just a painting. Like, use all of these amazing faculties that you've developed. Just it's given to you as a gift of life. So just appreciate it. It's okay to remember that though everything is infinite, it's just really, when it all boils down to it, the only thing that's important is your perspective. It's how you perceive life and how you interpret it. That's the only thing that matters, because that's all you have. Like, you have all these great philosophers that talk about, like, doubting everything. Like Descartes said you should doubt every existence, but it's not really the case. Like, if all you have is your perspective, then that is your universe. That's it. That's all you got. So do the best with it as you can. Thank you for tuning in. That's all we have for today's episode. This is Spark Studios, and if you're looking for more interesting content like this, you can check out our next episode titled Ethics of Economy, where we explore human greed and why it is inhibiting societal growth, and also why it's probably not going to change anytime soon. As I said, thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Kid Quark, reminding you that all it takes to get inspired is a little spark.